there's been a sense that what we're doing right now is not just another kind of like message and meeting, but it's almost as though there's a template coming out of heaven. It's like Peter had a vision of that net let down out of heaven, and into that net were all these creeping things, and at first they looked unclean to his Jewish diet. But the Lord said to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." And then what happened next was a sequence of divine appointments. Someone knocking on a door, the Spirit saying, "Go and don't doubt." Next thing you know, angels had already set this thing up in Cornelius' household. He shows up, he starts to talk, the Spirit of God falls. And what you realize is that, at least I'm realizing, that I'm just stewarding a message, but I have not been able to leave the message for 9 years. And it's been frustrating, because I've had people that have said to me, "Are you still into that Seven Mountain thing?" You know, I feel like saying, "Are you still into the Jesus thing?" I'm only doing what I got to do because I don't think I can move from this point to another subject, because this particular concept seems to me to be it's almost like if you ever put together a big puzzle. You got a big puzzle with all these pieces on, and if you ever do a big puzzle, you've got a real advantage if you can get the lid to the box in front of you when you do it. Because if you got all the pieces to the puzzle, I mean, this person has this piece, this person has that piece, and my gosh, you guys know the body of Christ is terribly fragmented. So, you've got a charismatic piece, an evangelical piece, a piece that's still working in the Catholic Church. You got a piece over here that's messianic. You got a piece over here that are moving on into a prophetic apostolic paradigms. Other pieces that are nervous about dominion. These people don't have enough dominion. It's kind of nutty out there. And so if I'm looking at this thing and saying, "Lord, is there a template that helps make sense of what we're doing?" I mean, some of you, how many of you are pastoring and working in the marketplace? Like my brother, just with authority. I like a prayer with authority. See, it takes me 5 times as long to get that kind of result, because I don't have the same authority. Put your hand up. Let me see if you're working. Okay, so now where I came from, I was in the business world. And from the business world, I kept praying for God's perfect will in ministry. Because 25, 30 years ago, you were either in the marketplace or you were in the ministry. And then, you really knew you hit the jackpot in the call of God if you were in full-time ministry. Because like part-time was like still, auditioning. Full-time was when you got, you made it into like the movie industry or something for ministry. So I couldn't wait, and I would pray earnestly, "Father, I just want your perfect will in work and in ministry," knowing that at some point the work would become the ministry and I'd be in full-time ministry, which kind of meant that I could really change the world more, because I wasn't in business. I was in the revival zone. And of course, England messed me up. The UK totally messed me up, because I've read Whitfield, I've read Wesley and Fletcher, and I studied, the emergence of the Salvation Army, not just William Booth. I interviewed 90-year-old and 100-year-old generals from the old army, which knew Samuel Logan Brengle when they were, when he walked in a room, and they tell me you could feel it when Samuel walked in the room, because he'd be in the front row and the anointing would just wash in front of him all the way to the front. You could feel the presence of God increasing as he walked into the room from the back. You didn't have to turn around. You knew when he walked in. I mean, I was fed those things. And what it did was it produced a real dissatisfaction for the status quo. You understand that you that are pressing into this have to be the most frustrated people in all the world. See, because if you don't believe in healing, you don't get upset if someone doesn't get healed. If you don't believe in deliverance, you don't really shrug your shoulders if somebody can't get set free. If you don't believe that Jesus wants to change nations, then you just kind of pray your prayers, as problems come along, but you don't expect the nation to change. But if you have an expectation that Jesus heals, that Jesus delivers, that Jesus saves, and that his goal is to change history and shake nations, the higher your expectation, the greater your capacity for frustration. Does that make sense to you? I mean, how many of you have prophecies that have not yet been fulfilled in your life? Just let's take a look around the room. That's got to be maddening. I mean, think about it. Someone that never got a prophecy, for all they know, they're doing what they're supposed to do. And what most people do is they park their unfulfilled expectations in heaven. And their basic point is this: when we get to heaven, when the Lord comes. And so their whole faith is like postponed to like when Jesus comes back or when they go, then everything works out. They've learned how to negotiate between where they are and where they'd like to be by assuming heaven is where it all gets fixed. But you've got prophecy, so that totally messes you up. Because you've got something you're supposed to do that you haven't done yet. Now here's the good news. The good news with that. It's funny, actually, I think it was Graham Cook I heard say this, but I was at a meeting once where some guys come over and said, I want you to pray for this like 9-year-old, this 10-year-old, almost drowned, and like, you know, where he's struggling between life and death. And one of the questions was, somebody had asked me was, they said, has he had any prophecies that are not fulfilled yet? And I thought that was kind of a strange question, but here was the point. If there's prophecies that aren't fulfilled yet, then there's a good argument right there for praying for God to do something to intervene, because there's a purpose we're contending for that hasn't manifested at this point. And so we started praying along those lines, and I thought, that's an interesting idea. The idea that if a person hasn't fulfilled their purpose yet, then they actually have an argument with death itself. Then I was at a meeting, and it's curious, Sharon, that it was in Detroit. And it was right after Bishop Bill Hammond had been in Detroit. And a strange thing happens. They're pioneering the prophetic in the city. And a lady gets up with like a big thick notebook like this, filled with prophecies. And she says, I want you all to know the credibility and reality of the prophetic. I've had a notebook of prophetic words God's given to me, and I can tell you right now that God has fulfilled every single one of those prophecies. Prophecy is real. I am living proof of the validity and the credibility of the prophetic. And then she died like a week later, which was kind of anticlimactic for the opening of the conference. But Bishop Hammond did a brilliant thing, that he took what she said, and here's what he said in his opening event at the conference. He said, I understand that this conference was largely fueled by the testimony of someone who had labored in the prophetic for many years and had a notebook of fulfilled prophecies. And actually, here's the point. If all your prophecies have been fulfilled, there's probably no reason for you to stay here. So if your prophecies haven't been fulfilled, it may produce frustration, but on the other hand, it's evidence you're not supposed to die yet. Right? So even though there's frustration, the frustration should produce innovation. And this is what Wesley did. This is what Whitefield did. It is what Wilberforce did. It is what... You got a lot of W reformers, I've noticed, now that I think about it. It was what William Booth did. And so if you look at it in terms of a graph, and I'm using this illustration. I've used this in a long time, but it seems to work. These are results. This is the results curve over here. We'll call that fruit. This is the fruit. And so Jesus is looking for fruit. What kind of fruit is he looking for? Well, what we have been assuming the Lord is looking for is he's looking for a harvest. And so most of our effort is about getting a harvest of souls. Now, there we go. Let's see. There's a 10, 5, 1, 5, 10. Okay. Here's where we've gone. We've gone up to here, let's say, and we've kind of hit a plateau. How many of you say that, in your opinion, you've seen kind of a Toronto prophetic revival, miracle signs, wonders, salvation, healings? You've seen a lot of momentum coming in. If you've been around for 30 years, you've seen a lot of stuff happen. Do you kind of feel like we've hit a plateau somewhere? I sure do. And going around the world, I'd say that there's a lot of people who are riding the plateau. This is called the sigmoid curve. It's a simple XY axis. It means that in terms of results, profitability for a business, fruit for a ministry, results from heaven's point of view, you get, life is like this. You start moving in certain ways and you hit a prime. You hit a point. This is like physical vitality. Somewhere around, I don't know, maybe it's 35 or 40, around 45, I started noticing I was losing hair where I wanted it and growing hair where I never thought I'd had it. And that was like the plateau. And then if you don't do something to change that, you keep going, kind of going down. Now this curve, this axis over here is called time. So what happens is, over the course of time, you get a certain amount of results, things plateau and they go down. When God is moving in history, this is the graph you've got. You've got a certain innovation that breaks through. I don't care whether it's This could be like Azusa Street, 1906, 1908. Suddenly there's a breakthrough in Azusa, but it hits a plateau. And around that time, God, what does he do? Let's find another